Arrows coming.
Nope.
I'm ulting.
Good shit.
I died.
We got it too.
Oh my
Good
god, the final.
You fucking dicks. Hey guys, it's Rhinne. Today we're going to be talking about Decidueye. Let's first start with talking about his item. The first item you're going to be taking is Muscle Band. The Muscle Band is pretty much staple on every single range character, save like 2, and so you're going to be taking it because it provides insane damage, it helps you shred objectives, and it synergizes really well with his attack speed. Second item you're going to be taking is Scope Lens. Scope Lens is very strong on characters that auto-attack a lot, like Greninja or Cinderace or Decidueye, who also fits the same role, so that's a good item for him as well. Now the last item is pretty up for debate, and I haven't really settled on one. I've narrowed it down to 3 choices though. The one that I'm currently running is Buddy Barrier. Now Buddy Barrier is much weaker on Decidueye than it is on pretty much every other character in the game. Decidueye's ult is really weird given that you're using it before you actually engage a lot of the time, so Buddy Barrier doesn't get as much effectiveness as it normally does. You don't want to ult in a fight like you would a Cinderace or a Greninja or whatever. Another item you can take is Focus Band. Focus Band can help with enemies who want to dive on top of you. Very helpful at first Bees and for first Dreadnought, so it's very strong for those. It kind of falls off later on, but it's still a good item. And then the last item is slightly experimental, so you can test this one out or on your own time, and it's Energy Amp. I haven't tested this myself, but people have theorized about it, and basically the goal is to use your ult from as far as possible and just do like chunk damage. So this would synergize with something like Spirit Shacke. Now that we've talked about items, let's move on to skills, starting with his basic attack. His basic attack stacks increases attack speed up to 4 times. Once you hit 4 stacks, your autos split their damage between 4 hits. You cannot stack these stacks unless you actually hit a target manually, so that means you can't shoot it in the air and have it magically hit something, like something that's about to spawn. This also means you can't just throw out an auto attack and have it stack up like you would normal boosted attacks. The stacks drop rather quickly as well, within like 2 seconds or so. So if you're out of combat for a long amount of time or you're charging up Spirit Shackle, they will drop off. The passive makes it so if you're X amount of distance away from an enemy, you do bonus damage. Try to be at max range when clearing mobs, but when I'm in fights, I don't worry about this too much outside of using my ult. Now, let's move on to actual abilities. And the main ability Decidueye is going to be using is RazorLeaf. RazorLeaf is a strong auto attack buff, and it's very good against melee characters because they're going to have to get hit by the multiple Runeon's Hurricane bolts, essentially, if you've ever played League. Ideally, you want to wait to pop RazorLeaf until you have 4 stacks if it's going to be a long fight, but if it's going to be a short fight, you just want to pop RazorLeaf to get as much damage to chip them as soon as possible. This is the better general move if you're unsure about which of the 2 to take. Now moving on to Spirit Shackle. Spirit Shackle is actually pretty good, better than I think people are giving it credit for. It's pretty good for like poker pick comps, like let's say you have like a Venusaur or you're running an Assassin. You can snipe their backline. It has extremely long range. Think like Solar Beam, essentially. I take it against pretty squishy teams. You generally don't see these kinds of teams in competitive play, but in like solo queue, you'll see like Greninja, Cinderace, Ninetales, Eldegoss, and then whatever. Those are the kind of teams that I'll consider taking Spirit Shackle into. Or teams that I feel like I'm not going to be able to auto a lot because they have like a lot of assassins. If you charge up to the line in the middle of combat, you will drop all of your stacks, so keep that in mind. It will be a DPS loss for you to do that. The execute is pretty minor, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. We thought it'd be much more like pop, but it ends up it's not, so whatever. And then the Shackle itself is pretty underwhelming. It doesn't really do too much damage. It's like 150 damage or so, and the slow is pretty negligible. You're not even going to catch up to your target if you end up landing it. Honestly, they probably need to buff that aspect of it. Moving on to the ability to get to level 8 between Shadow Sneak and Leaf Storm. So I prefer taking Shadow Sneak in pretty much almost every situation. You can use Shadow Sneak to do a lot of things. It can scout and help you move across the map and use it to engage on people because of the slow. It has an extremely long range. As far as I'm aware, the movement speed seems to fade away if the target, or rather the shadow, ends up going on another target. And the way the targeting works for this thing is if someone is aggroed a mob, it'll go towards them, but if no mobs are aggroed, it won't actually leave until you aggro a mob. And then if there's an enemy, regardless of where they are, if they're like hidden in a bush or whatever, you can't see them, it'll still jump to them as long as they're within the range. The range of this thing is absolutely huge. You can like be in the middle of like the Zapdos corridor, and then you can use it, and then it'll see somebody hiding in the bush. It's pretty insane. Now the other ability you can take is Leaf Storm. I almost never take this move. Honestly, it's pretty garbage. The chance of you actually being able to knock somebody with it is really low, but if you can knock somebody, it's pretty good. I pretty much only take it against Heavy Dive because outside of going against Heavy Dive, it's pretty garbage. Doesn't really do shit for damage. It's extremely low range, so only use it if they have like a bunch of assassins trying to jump on you, like let's say Zera or a Talon or those kinds of things. Your Unite move is probably the weirdest Unite move to use in the game. So you kind of want to use your Unite move before you actually engage a fight, or like chip them out, or like right at the start of a fight, unlike other Unite moves where you'd want to use it in like the middle of a fight or like save it for a team fight. Because of this, I think he has like a really weird role in teams that'll probably take a little bit to be figured out. Also because of this, Buddy Bear ends up being bad, as we mentioned before. You don't really want to use his ult in the middle of the fight. It's not like a Cramorant ult where you want to stay still because you're losing out on a lot of auto attack damage. And then on top of this, you're very vulnerable when you do it as well. using it when the enemy is on top of you is generally a waste unless you need like a shield from Buddy Bear or something. You can just like auto attack and reposition and you'd probably end up doing better in a fight anyway, and you'd also be able to hit multiple targets. Don't forget that the ult is non-piercing, so that means if you have multiple targets there, besides the last bolt, you're pretty much going to do no damage compared to like auto attacking with a RazorLeaf. And then one thing to consider as well is you can use your Unite move and then instantly cancel it in order to try and get the buff for more attack speed to do, let's say, Zapdos or just do more damage in fights. Often I'll end up cheesing Zapdos by just doing it and then killing Zapdos in like 5 seconds because you do absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage with the percent damage on RazorLeaf and then Muscle Band and then your stupid attack speed. Now that we've talked about his skills, let's move on to his gameplay, starting with his early game. Your early game is extremely terrible, actually. It's actually worse than Cinderace, who I thought beforehand had pretty much the worst early game out of all the viable junglers. For the most part in the jungle, you can maintain most of your stacks, especially if you're on sand side. So try to kite camps and figure out how exactly to do that. Maintain your whole stacks the whole time so you can move to lanes as fast as possible. When you're ganking, you're going to be auto attacking just like Cinderace. It's how you're going to handle bees as well. Your Leafage and your Astonish don't really do too much damage to bees, so you're pretty much reliant on your blue buff and your auto attack to secure bees. You can use Astonish to A-click spam on people. So unlike Cinderace, you actually have a pretty potent slow, so you can use that to run down people if you have a very strong lane. And then you can't really fight at mid crabs because you're that weak, so you should probably consider giving them up if your teammates aren't helping you. To showcase how weak you are, I was 100% health at mid crabs and I had 4 stack, and there was a Greninja who was 30% health who went on me, and I won that fight with 10% health left. You are actually god-awful early game. Alright, moving on to the mid game. Once you finally get the Decidueye, you can actually start fighting pretty well. RazorLeaf shreds, and then if you go Spirit Shackle, that's actually even stronger early game. You can combine this with like Pup to pretty much just like one-shot something. Try to use your Ignite move before a fight actually starts. That way you can actually just sit there and auto attack if you're playing RazorLeaf, for example, or to look for picks, or just to even utilize your passive. Make sure you try and play back if possible. You're a super squishy character, I think the lowest HP in the game. You have no mobility, and you don't really have a way to peel, so it's very risky to play aggressively on this character. And use Shadow Sneak to move faster to the lane you're ganking, and then use the actual like shadow itself to like slow the enemy so you can get a successful gank off. And this is also comboable with something like Spirit Shackle, so you can hit them more easily. In the late game, you want to hug your supports and tanks, that way they can keep you alive. Utilizing their buddy barriers and their ults to help get peel is pretty much the only way you can really live. You shred Zapdos extremely fast. You can kill it in like 8 seconds or so if you use your Ignite for the attack speed buff. So if they're far away, consider just ripping it. Think like Cinderace, for example. You can use Shadow Sneak to check bushes that you think might be unsafe, assuming you're running Shadow Sneak. So that way you don't actually have to face check them yourselves, and you can find out where the enemies are and position properly for things like Zapdos or the late game Rotom. Once again, don't forget, you want to try and use your Ignite to engage when possible. You want to poke them out before an actual fight will occur, because if you wait until they're on top of you, you're going to do less damage, and then you're not going to be able to auto attack during it, so you're just losing out on damage even more from that. And then, I mean, I said it before, but don't forget, this character is insanely squishy. You will die pretty much instantly. If Zera jumps on you, he doesn't even need his ult to kill you. He just needs like 2 autos and then half of a discharge, and you will evaporate. Anyway, that's it for this guide. If you guys have any questions or anything, you guys can ask in the comments below. Or there's a Discord server you guys can join. That'll be in the description. If you guys want to see Decidueye gameplay, I have a stream that'll also be down in the description. And until then, or until next time, I guess take care.